Hey, welcome to another edition of Practical Pet Business. Lorin, there are so many things going on in the pet world, and then you throw in a big event like we have coming up here. I have gotten a lot of folks that are excited about it, but when I ask them, cool, what are your priorities as you're going there? I'm curious. I get these answers that are just all over the place, a little bit chaotic. And I'm thinking to myself, should I say something and help narrow down their focus so it's more effective for them, or should I just let them go and meander? Let me ask you, as you go to these trade shows and you were looking from your personal standpoint, your store standpoint, sometimes there are different pathways, and these are big, giant shows. So, how did you really narrow down and stay focused? Because it is a limited amount of time and it's a lot to get through, whether it's the education, the boosts, and the new products, and all the rest of this. There's just a
Mhm.
lot going on.
Yeah, it really it really would depend on, what kind of a business you are. And if you're a retailer, are you a chain, an independent chain? Do you have a couple of stores, one store, micro independent, that sort of thing? I know that I tend to like to be organized. That didn't last when I went to the trade shows because, you evolve as a store too. And if you haven't been before, I would recommend you just go to take it all in, because it can be overwhelming.
Yeah.
Um, if you've been, like I've gone every year for, oh my God, 25 years. Oh my God. Um, and it's been different from year to year. I mean, it depends on what I'm looking for, what's happening in the economy, where my store is at, in terms of its revolution, that kind of thing. Find it difficult to stay organized to a pre-figured out plan. Even doing appointments, I got to the point with people that we just exchanged phone numbers and, hey, are you free? That sort of thing. Because if I'm at a booth finding out about something and it runs over, I don't want to have to cut that person off to run to another appointment. And, I guess it just depends on where you're at. Because this year, I'm going under furry-based consulting and I've got customers there. I'm helping some people. I'm going for, a few different reasons. And so it's a little bit more structured because of that. Because my time really is locked into some other people's specific times as my customers. But I don't think a lot of people who are new to it are prepared for how big it is, how much walking there is, how often you go from one end just to turn around and you get the text message, "Hey, I'm free." It's like, "Oh, I'll be right there. It'll be about 10 minutes, but I'm on my way," and you hoof it over to the other side of the show. Um, it's difficult. My for sure's every year were I wanted to be in the natural pet area, because that was the genre of my store. Um, it was heavily natural pet at first, and now there's sort of a blend. So I did that. And sometimes the layout too of the show, you plan on a certain thing and then you get there and the layout is like, oh my gosh, this person that I want to talk to is 100 miles away from where 80% of the other people I need to talk to. And suddenly priority shifts because they're backburnered then, because you're seeing everybody else that you know. So I think it's really difficult to have an agenda. Now, if you're a distributor or a manufacturer, totally different ballgame.
Yeah.
You're meeting specifically with people. But you were a manufacturer for me when I
Yep.
went, and it was really, I was happy that he had a booth. So I knew that I had a pretty
Yeah.
good shot of whenever I went to the booth, I was going to get some time. Distributors, oh my gosh, I've wanted to talk to a couple of the upper echelon people and a couple of my distributors in the past, and really it's a try to slide in between appointments kind of thing because they are booked solid,
Yeah.
and they're also trying to sign and look for new things that they might want to bring into distribution, have those conversations. It's all over the map.
Yeah, I agree. I like several things called out there. As a vendor, you've got to make it's so expensive to do these shows these days. So you really have to have a plan. You've really got to stick to that. You got to execute it. And frankly, you're doing a lot more pre-conference and event work than
Hmm.
you are as an attendee, as a store. But I think you're right. Once you hit that show floor, anything can and will happen.
Hmm.
And it is interesting because I have seen people on the last day of these shows upset and just, beside themselves because they didn't get to everybody they wanted to. They didn't blah, blah. And I'm just like, typically that would be a good thing. Why didn't you get there? Well, I got caught up in these conversations. And I'm like, at the end of the day, I would rather have five good conversations than hit 500 booths. Because if I'm hitting 500, I'm probably not getting a lot of deep work done. It's all
Sure.
surface level. Quite frankly, in many of those situations, I probably could have just gone ahead, taken a quick, picture and gone to their website at a later time. And then if I wanted
Hmm.
to pursue it. Um, and that is how I approach things sometimes myself, because I have been there as media, I've been there as a vendor, I've been there just for so many different reasons. And from the standpoint of the folks that are going looking for the new products, looking for the education, looking have a plan. Like I'm going to commit X amount of time to this or that. The one that I get being upset about is when there is educational opportunities available and there's a speaker that you really want to hear from, prioritize that. Prioritize that because typically the speakers and the educational opportunities, you're not going to get a second crack at that. You can, as you said, you can get to different booths, you can coordinate with somebody else. A lot of times these speakers are in and out in a matter of hours because they've got other things going on. So that's one call out I would say. One of the other ones too was interesting was you've been there every year. I went many years in a row, and I actually hit a point where I was like, you know what? I'm not sure I'm getting enough payoff to be at the multiple events throughout the country each year. And so I started to stagger them because I just felt like I kept seeing the same thing I had seen a few months earlier.
Sure.
And sometimes I was happy I saw it later. Sometimes I was happy I saw it earlier. So you just kind of got to get into that mindset of I'm going to attend. I think that's really important. But when and where fits my business needs, look at your business cycle, understand, is this one going to have an impact for this year or is it going to have an impact for next year? Um, it's an interesting dynamic that's gone on
Mhm.
within the events as well because to me they feel bigger than they've ever been, yet I'm not quite as certain that I'm getting that much more info. Bigger does not always
Right.
mean I'm getting a ton of quality. Because remember, folks, at the end of the day, all of these events are, we'll take as many as we can fit in and squeeze in, and then from there, there's always folks that aren't there. And I've seen a lot of that. The other thing I've seen that's interesting too, and this is why I say check that floor exhibition map ahead of time, who's got those huge booths and who's got all of that going on. It used to be that there were many, you know, triple, quadruple booths and above. I'm seeing less and less of that these days. It's really interesting. And I love one other thing too. Distributors love them, don't love them. I know all of you out there have your own opinions. What I will say is, from a trade show standpoint, it is a nice way to get in and see what's new and hot. in one big booth because that's what the distributors are typically focused on is,
Sure.
hey, we've got these 8 brands that we're really pushing hard. Here's their newest, here's their best selling, here's this. So, if I'm trying to maximize, especially that last day where I don't have a lot of time, that's usually my distributor day where I'm going and looking at it saying, I need to, hit more with less time. And on that last day, there's a lot less of the executives around. And
Right.
so that's another point. If you've got to meet with a top executive or that's part of your goals, then you want to be doing that the first day, the second day, because by the third and beyond, they're just not there. They've got to get back. They've got folks that are handling different elements.
Mhm.
But yeah, I love that. But there is so much to do. Um, and don't sell short the education part.
I love the education part. It's so hard. When I first started going to Super Zoo, the education part was so interesting. It was like, even if it was something I knew, other perspectives and the questions that were asked, that was really interesting.
yeah,
Unfortunately, as my store grew, I had less time because there were more people I wanted to see. There were more products that I wanted to touch and learn about. And I got to a point where there just wasn't enough time for me to
right.
be able to do the education. And that was a huge negative for me because, it wasn't about the cost or anything like that. I felt like, gosh, one more day would have made all the difference,
Yeah,
and it just wasn't, that's not something that was an opportunity. And so I had to, okay, well, the store, gosh, the education's valuable to the store, but the products are everything to the store.
right.
So I had to go with the product,
Yeah,
and go,
you can't lose the whole day to
no,
education. That's why I say you got to pick. Sometimes there are just those folks that really align with your mission, your goal. And if this is a chance to hear them in person, see it, feel the energy, really absorb what they're saying, and this is the part about it, un, you know, chaotically, meaning, hey, I'm just in the moment here. I'm in the room. I'm going to be focused and dialed in. The phone is put down. I'm blocking out everything other than the speaker. And that's hard to do in this world. So I do like that element of it. And then it also just depends on the conference you're going to, right? There are some
right.
conferences that are really exhibitor centric and product centric. And then there are others that have that unique dynamic of it's a dual purpose,
Mhm.
education and exhibitor. Um, I tend to like those a lot. And I also tend to find that when you have that dual purpose, you have less exhibitors and you have more speakers, obviously, because they're breaking up the amount of time. Um, and it's just a good balance. I feel energized to be able to go learn something, go back to the exhibit hall because I'm fired up. And I just feel those are the ones that I prioritize these days. I feel like I can get a lot of the exhibitor information um, as deep, if not better, elsewhere. There are so many avenues. But as I say that, I'm thinking about how we see consolidations and less reps and all the rest of that out there.
Mhm.
So
Well, and it's all about the
dynamic.
relationship. So the trade show gives you the opportunity, right, to go to the booth, and maybe it's somebody new to you and you don't have an established relationship. So you get to go meet somebody, look them in the eye, sort of determine their passion, their knowledge, that sort of thing, what kind of philosophy they have about their company or their brand. And that can make or break, the purchase that a retailer will or won't make. So, for me, I wanted to, and that happened to me. I can remember, oh my gosh, remember when there were like, I'm sure it wasn't 100, but it felt like 100 CBD booths,
Oh yeah.
Oh my, it
By
was
the way,
like,
you're correct. It wasn't. It was well over.
oh my gosh,
But
it was
everybody, yeah,
ridiculous. It was
yeah,
ridiculous. And it felt like a CBD trade show.
yeah.
And I get it, but it's like, oh no, this is not, so many of them you knew weren't going to last. And they were
Especially since
hawking,
so many of them were made by one co-packer, and hopefully
well,
audience by now, you all really get the co-packer, discussion there.
Well,
So
and so many of them, they were so quick to come to market. So they
yeah,
weren't knowledgeable. They didn't know what they were talking about. They didn't hire knowledgeable people to speak for them. Worse was when there was somebody who was the VIP, or the VP, I should say, behind the company, they were instrumental to starting it and creating it, and they can't tell you anything about it. It's like, okay, I'm done now.
well, and the
And
other part of that was there was nothing unique.
there
Like
was nothing unique.
that's just product 101. And I laugh because you mentioned that particular person and the amount of times I've seen this, and it's not just unique to the CBD world, but
No, it
you'll
isn't.
see the same quotes or the same picture of that
Hmm.
particular person behind this. And I don't want to say give them that much credit behind the movement. That's not what this was, but it was just funny because you'd see him and I'd be like, yeah, I just saw this person's picture 3 booths over,
Right.
5 booths over, and this is not good marketing. But yet, sometimes I hate to say it, that's the other advantage of going and seeing, wait a second, what's unique about this? Because I see 10 of these. And you wouldn't see that necessarily online because we're just bombarded with stuff.
Well,
So I
and while
figured
it's
it'd go
not
out.
unique to
Yeah.
CBD, I can tell you in 25 years, I can't think of another category that had that much of a rush
Yeah.
to trade show market, I guess the second one would have been after DCM, the
Yeah.
nutritional DCM. And then all of a sudden everybody's hawking their latest and greatest grain-filled whatever. I get it. I mean, I get what stimulates that, but at the same time, when you're a retailer, you have to really be savvy about that so that you don't get sucked into the wrong thing.
Yes.
And you have to go armed with, is that what I'm after this trip? Because if I am, I better be prepared with the kind of questions I'm going to ask and the
I
kind
love
of
that you
homework that I need to do,
yeah.
because if you're going to walk up to 100 and some CBD booths, and then try to figure out which one you're going to go with or which ones you're going to go with, it's a disaster. I mean, it's just not
Yeah.
going to happen.
I
So
love that you bring that up. That is so important. Showing up with the questions, with some research.
prepared. Yeah.
Don't expect to show up to a vendor show and be educated from 0 to 100.
Mhm.
You really need to be at that 50, 60 mark. And then you can, decipher because it's marketing. It's meant to impress you and make you feel good about a decision. You need to get through some of that. I remember to that point, someone go, "We have this entire Houston." And I'm like, "Yeah, and you can't grow on the backside of that mountain. So let's be honest here. You don't have the biggest fields. Come on, that's just such a ridiculous." And it's like when I finally heard someone saying that for the 43rd time, I was like, ask them, can they grow on the entirety of those fields? And it was like, whoops, so doing some research, asking those questions will save you time, energy, because that's the problem too, right? We get stuck at these booths and we're interested and then we're getting excited, we're getting hyped up. Yeah, okay, this is it. I'm good. But now I've lost 2 hours of my day. What happened here? I stopped by for a 5 minute discussion and became a half hour before I even took a second breath.
Right. But it's we've talked about this before too. If you use the analogy of reading the packaging on, I'll say pet food because it's, pet is our topic, but of anything, you're getting the marketing. You're getting this is what we want you to think and what we want you to see and that sort of thing. Turn it over. Now you really start to get into what is really what they're about. And then you have questions you have to ask about that. That's what a trade show is. It's
Yeah.
everybody putting their best foot forward. It's like it's like speed dating. It's everybody putting their best foot forward and hitting you with, bright and shiny objects and hoping that they'll catch your eye. And then you have to make the decisions of who you're going to give your really hard-earned, limited funds to. And to go unprepared, to go and not have questions or to rush into anything. I see people that, get pressured. I'll stand and I'll listen to some of the people behind the booths talking and they pressure, it's hard sell for some of these. And it's like, I'm going to take this back to my room and I'm gonna, if I place an order, it'll be tomorrow or the next day, or, when does the orders, when do they end? Well, they'll end on Friday. Okay, so can I get you an order over the weekend? Would that still count? Because maybe you need some more time and it doesn't hurt to ask. I've never not been able to get an order in before Monday the following week and have it accepted as a Super Zoo order. So I think rushing into things only does what it always does, right? It inspires buyer's remorse. Didn't ask enough questions, didn't know, felt pressured, didn't want to miss what you thought was a good deal, those kinds of things. And if you're not ready, don't do it because ISOs are sometimes as good, if not better. Sometimes if you're an established account, your rep will work with you. There's a lot of leeway and gray area, and I think that lots of deep breathing needs to go on with, building in some time for review before you pull the trigger,
Yeah.
unless you know what you
Well,
want.
yeah, I love you just hit on the deep breathing. A few other tips for all of you. Make sure you're wearing comfortable. This is the other funny thing is trade shows are not typically very comfortable. You got to drink a ton of water
Mhm.
um, because you're walking so much, and the air conditioning never, is
And you're in
sufficient.
recycle there. Yep.
Yeah, it's just, but it's also, this is not typical padded carpeting and all the rest of that. And so what's interesting, I'll hear from folks by that second and third day, like, oh, my hips are my knees, my ankles, my feet, you know, prepare for that. This is not a fashion show. Okay. And I'm guilty of it in the past myself, but I now wear comfortable shoes. That's my biggest priority. Everything else, secondary to what is going to make me feel physically best. Not, I'm not, auditioning for the cover of Vogue. So,
So I have to tell you this funny story. I have to tell you this funny story because you'll
okay.
you'll appreciate it. So remember, this is 25 years ago, and I was coming off of corporate America. Okay.
Yeah.
So I hadn't heard of Super Zoo before. Somehow I heard of it. I was just starting to, you know, um, I think we might have just rented the space for the store. And so I was like, I'm getting on a plane. I'm running off to Vegas. I'm going to take one day to go see what this is all about, blah, blah, blah. And I was in 6-inch heels because
Oh,
that's what I wore, every day in corporate America. And it was normal for me. So it wasn't like it was a big deal and it was pretty comfortable. I was barefoot carrying my shoes around, barely halfway through the show. So, obviously nobody here is going to go to that extreme. But when you don't know what you're
yeah,
in for, I was dressed for work and I was hitting the ground running and I was like, oh, this was such a bad idea. So
yeah.
needless to say, from that point on, it was tennis shoes.
Yeah, no, I love that. One of the other things too that I'll throw out to all the vendors out there that are going, because I've felt your pain extensively in trying to plan for the booth, prep for the booth, ship the booth, build the booth, then, lay out the booth perfectly, get all the product, have some grace for yourself. All right. Anybody coming by to your booth, they're going to give you the benefit of the doubt. You're a quality product. Tell them about your product. Tell them what's unique, what the benefits are. Don't get worked up. I have been in the booth. I have felt it myself of, oh my gosh, we don't have X. It's okay. The company
Yeah.
existed before the trade show. It's going to exist after the trade show. But I see just the torpedoing happen so many times, or it's such a difficult booth to actually build.
Hmm.
Um, Either invest in the tradesmen to build it, um, or have that difficult conversation because people spend so much money on these
Yeah.
booths. Oh my gosh. um, And so that's always, interesting and unique to me as well. And the last thing too is, and it's different now. I mean, I was just at a trade show a couple weeks ago now, and it's funny because I didn't bring a bag for the first time ever. I was like, I'm not carrying around everybody's promotional stuff. When they go to give me something, I'll snap a picture of it, and that's it. And I would really, this is not just hey, it's good for the environment. It's good for everybody's backs.
Right.
Whatever you can, have it, relatable digitally. Just a quick QR code, or hey, you can go to our website, here's the code, SZ 2025, and be able to get the materials that are here. Have them available for those who still like that. But I think you'll be surprised how many people will be grateful that, okay, great, I don't have to take that. Anybody who was like, no, I have to send this, I was like, that's okay. I'll reach out to you if I want it. But I had it as a goal because it was my second trade show of the week. I'm not taking back all this stuff that I then have to spend hours going through. I'm going to just, quickly take digital imaging. And those that had those, I would argue you can do a lot more after the fact. Remember, they're seeing dozens and dozens of products and booths.
Hmm.
Having that follow up of being able to take it digitally, you can not slip in, but you can put in additional information that you may not have time at the booth. How many times you come by our booth and we had 5, 6 people waiting. There's nothing worse, but they all wanted to talk to the founder of it. And it was like, that's great, but she's one person and can't have 7 different conversations. You can, if you put those up digitally and all that. So I'll just throw that out, as
Yeah.
I've had a number of folks reaching out going, hey, what's your best tip for this? What's the best approach as a vendor? And I'm just like, it's not that hard. We're all digital these days.
Right.
Build out your digital. You're spending so much time to be there in person. I love that. But where we all drop off is that follow up afterwards and making it easy for everyone. So I love it. There's so much to talk about because it's
So
such a
much.
event. It's such a big event. I'm sure we'll have things to share when we come back. But hey, we want to respect your time. We know you've got a lot on your plate, running your business, working with all your customers, your staff. There's just a lot coming at you. Lorin and I really appreciate you spending any time with us. We know how valuable it is. So thanks for joining us here on Practical Pet Business. Can't wait to see you soon.
Bye, guys.
The content of this podcast is for informational purposes only. It is not intended as, nor should it be construed as, professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment for your pets. Always seek the advice of a qualified veterinarian with any questions you may have regarding your pet's health or medical condition. Never disregard professional veterinary advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard on this podcast. The hosts and the guests of this podcast are not liable for any actions taken based on the information shared during these episodes. Any reliance on the information provided is solely at your own risk. Copyright 2025 Practical Pet Chat, all rights reserved. Unauthorized duplication, distribution, or reproduction of any content from this podcast, including but not limited to audio, scripts, and show notes, is prohibited without prior written consent. The opinions and views expressed by the host and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of Practical Pet Chat.